Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. I'm your host, Quaviondre Williams.
And I'm Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. Daquon, honey, what is hot on the table this week?
Girl, so first we gotta talk about Disney. So recently, Disney released the trailer to the forthcoming film, Sneakerella, which features a primarily Black cast obsessed with sneakers in a modern, gender-bent twist on Cinderella. Many people expressed their frustration with the racial undertones of the movie, such as Twitter user Orlink, who tweeted, "How does Disney have the audacity to put out a Black Cinderella film called Sneakerella? Ain't no way this shit ain't racially motivated. Bet you 100% the director is white too." Well, their assumption proved to be more than correct, with the director being a white woman and all but one of the credited writers being white. It should be noted that the one Black writer was the last to be credited, which may suggest that he had a lesser impact than the other writers. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that this movie is problematic and racially motivated?
100, 1,000, 1,000,000,000%. I don't, Daquan, this just cannot, like, this feels like, somebody said this online, I thought this was so cool. They were like, this sounds like a Key and Peele sketch, or like an SNL, or like an SNL sketch of like the white writers decide to make a story about Black people and they're calling it Sneakerella coming this fall. Like, it's really giving that energy. It feels like this is not real. And the fact that this whole story was pitched, written, and directed by all white people, with the exception of one, probably, like you said before, very not involved Black person, just the one person. It's just like, how did this happen? Like, I don't like, dude, there must not be no Black people at Disney. There must not be any Black people in the Disney's writing room.
Obviously not.
Because I just cannot buy into the fact that somebody wrote this down and somebody was like, yes, sneakers, Black people. How do we get the niggers? How do we get the Negroes? Ah, yes, they love the sneakers. Let's make the whole character them loving sneakers. Daquan.
Literally, when I saw the trailer, when you sent me the trailer and I watched it, I was like, they're not serious. This is a parody channel. This has to be, because what is happening? And I was so frustrated and annoyed because, like, so here's the thing. You know, could a movie centering Black people in sneaker culture be a great movie?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I can tell from this trailer alone that this movie ain't it. Like, when you think about how shoes are signified within Black communities, there is a significant cultural history and it's rich. You know, thinking about like slavery, enslaved people had scraps for shoes if they even had anything. So you can start to see why having a sturdy, good pair of shoes would mean and represent so much to them. Or even getting a little bit more grotesque, like during slavery and early Jim Crow, they took the skin and flesh of Black people to make it into leather to make shoes with.
Yeah.
Or bringing it to like a more contemporary time, like we hear stories about how like shoes are thrown on to power lines to represent people and memorials that are like young Black people who died too soon. And even like sneakerhead culture itself, which like came from Black culture, you can think things like Jordans and how they are like this big symbol for Black youth, that, you know, if they had sneakers like Jordan, then they can be like Jordan and get out of the hood. Which like Mike did. And that original screenplay was written by Michael Elliott, who's an African-American screenwriter. So it's like one of those things. Yeah. So it's one of those things that like there's all of this significance of how shoes throughout history have literally and figuratively held the lives, stories, dreams, and imagination of Black people within them. And so that's why it's so frustrating to see something like Sneakerella, which just commodifies a stereotype about Black people being obsessed with shoes and has a writer's room that looks like an untitled Google Doc. Like, so I'm just going to have to steal a page out of your book, Quaviondre. Dear Hollywood, stop capitalizing off of Black cultural significance when you don't have significant Black culture.
Period. And it's so interesting that you brought that up, because I wanted that like Mike, like that movie, you just took me back to like 2000 and whatever. Like that just took me all the way back. And like thinking back then, it's so crazy because I don't think that Disney or these major film companies that are oftentimes spearheaded and controlled by white people understand the significance of nuance. Because in communities of color, looking outside of something and saying, oh, Black people like shoes or whatever the case may be, and not understanding the cultural impact of what shoes mean to Black culture and why it's taken so seriously to some regard and stuff like that. So it's just like, I think that what I think they're missing here is nuance. They're missing nuance. They're missing the fact that we are so tired of white people telling stories that they do not come from. We are so tired of seeing people who are not within that culture writing about that cultural community. And it baffles me because, I mean, we've seen time and time again how this just does not work. This formula does not work. It never has. And I don't understand why we're even having this conversation in 2021. Have we not learned anything in this past decade? Have we not learned anything in the fact that Black people want to take in stories that are made by Black people? You know what I mean? Like, do you remember that big cultural impact, the one-on-one, half and half, and Martin and stuff like that? Shows that are written with Black people in mind, with Black people in the writings room, with people who are making those decisions, because we know what we like and we understand what we're saying. And I always say to people all the time is that, like, you can always, and I don't care who you are, as an African American, as a person of any cultural community, if someone makes a movie or a TV show about your cultural community, you can always tell whether or not it was people from that community writing it or if it's somebody looking outside of it in. And with this movie, the trailer, I had no doubt in my mind it was white people. I had no doubt in my, Daquon, it was in seconds. The first 10 to 20 seconds, I was like, a white man wrote this. A white man and a white woman or something like that. But in this case, all white women who wrote it. And it was just like, are you for real? Are y'all serious right now? Like, to me, it's honestly, it's so damaging. Because it further prepares, and like the worst part is if white people take in this film, because of course it won't be Black people taking it in, but if white people take in this film and appreciate it and like it or whatever the case may be, then that'll only further Disney's objective. I'm glad that we're starting to see the social outcry more significantly now, because people are saying that like it was so bad that Disney actually had to turn off their dislikes because of how savage.
Wait, God. Whew.
Oh, yes. They had to turn off their dislikes because of just how badly they were getting read into and just how badly they were the film was received. And I'm like, I feel so bad. Then what really hurts the most is those Black actors who are probably like, this is the only role that is written for us. And even though it's not written by us, it's the only role I could probably get. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't blame the actors themselves, because they're just doing a job. They're trying to get in a system that is purposefully ignoring their stories and ignoring creating characters that they can play. So it just feels bad because maybe the acting is pretty good. Maybe, I don't know, but this is Disney. But anyway, this is Disney. But
shade, I call shade.
But maybe the acting is pretty decent, and now these actors are basically going to have to, be forever associated with this culture vulture type film. And if you know what I'm saying, like, do you see what I'm saying here about that? Like, I feel so bad for them, because I know as an actor also, knowing just how difficult it is to have a role that you can play, and just how little roles there are, because every role is written, most roles are written for white people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and, like, I remember scrolling through Twitter and, like, seeing how excited one of the actors was to, like, finally have, like, their kind of, like, big break, like, it is
Yes.
Disney. Disney has this huge name, this huge brand behind it, so it is, like, one of these huge breaks that only come, maybe once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where, like, I don't blame the actors at all for being in this because like at the end of the day, like if they weren't taking this role, there's not that many other roles that they can take. And if they
Especially
did
at
come in,
Disney.
yeah, especially at Disney, and even like after getting into the role, like I think that they don't have much of a say because like if they come to the writers room as an actor and be like, "Hey, like this is kind of problematic," and like try to change their character for like the better, then like they're just going to be blackballed in Hollywood. So it's one of
Blackballed or
those
fired. Yep.
yeah, so it's one of those situations where like this is their chance to get a bag, so I'm not going to like downplay them on getting a bag. Like the problem is these writers and these directors who always lean into stereotypes when it comes to telling stories about communities that they're not from. Like it is so frustrating. Like I think the only black Cinderella should be the Brandy Cinderella because that's the only
Yeah.
one I will ever recognize. I don't recognize Sneakerella or whatever it's
No.
called. Like
and that's and it's crazy because like I don't understand how we I don't I just it just baffles me that this is happening. Like that's just what I'm so shook right now because I'm kind of like I thought, not saying that we were in some kind of renaissance or something like that, but I was like I thought that we were moving in a more positive direction. Like after movies like like after this new wave of showcasing people of color and stories by people of color, I thought maybe we've kind of moved past that and people recognize, like the big companies and stuff recognize that we want people in the writer's room who look like us. We want people who look like us writing about us. If you're not gay, no one's, and the crazy part is no one is saying that that you can't write a story about another culture. No one is saying that. I do think that there is something to be said about your level of research within that culture because
right.
one Google search would explain why basing an entire movie about black people about sneakers is a problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like one
Or
Google
or
search.
one Google search would tell them not to release the movie in February, Black History Month.
I mean, and it's just to me, it's so problematic because it's just like I don't understand how you can soak and this goes further into the entitlement of white people. And like I don't understand how you can be so confident in your skills as a writer to write about somebody else's experience that you as a white woman or it was a white, I think it was a white man in there too, right?
There was a
Yeah,
couple white men.
you as white people are so confident in your ability as a writer to write from an experience that you have never in your life could understand or fathom. You may be able to understand and grasp maybe 5 to 10% of the Black experience through research and education. But the true nature of Black people, the true essence of our culture can only be captured by someone of that culture. So if they had just made a regular story, and just had Black people as the main characters, that would not have been a problem. But it's the arrogance for me.
You're
It's
right.
the arrogance of writing a story so confidently thinking and believing that, oh yes, honey, we're writing about Black people. We know what they like. We know what they like. We'll figure they'll like it. They'll enjoy this. And then not to consult, not to have, I mean, not to have at least half of the writers team being Black. At
At least
least half.
bare minimum.
Or at least have, or I have the Black director to
That
show
part.
a Black viewpoint in a Black movie. It's, I don't understand. And I think it's just incredibly, it just to me feels like a quick cash grab. And I really hope that Disney I really hope these people tear them a new one on this one. I really
Right.
hope that the anger and the rage from this story keeps up. And when it comes out, people dog walk it even more. And I feel really bad for the actors. I really, really do. But I hope that we can make enough noise as fellow actors and writers and whatever's and so on and so forth to say, hey, this is not okay. Don't do this shit again. And hopefully Disney will understand, because the only way you can get white people to understand something, the only way you can get rich white people to understand something is to fuck with their money. And so when you fuck with the money, they recognize, we'll do just something different next time. We'll get black people next time. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, we fucked it up. We dropped the ball. Sorry about it. But shifting gears here, I want to transition into a story that's a little more somber. The Oxford High School community came back from Thanksgiving holiday in horror after a 15-year-old sophomore armed with a semi-automatic handgun fired shots this past Tuesday afternoon. The New York Times reports that 4 students, Hannah St. Juliana, 14, Madison Baldwin, 17, Tate Meyer, 16, and Justin Schilling, 17, were killed, and 7 other students and teachers were seriously or critically injured. Police reports found 2 videos of the gunman from the night before talking about shooting and killing students on his phone, and a journal detailing his wish to shoot up the school in his backpack. Now, he is now being charged with 4 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count of terrorism. Now, Daquon, I just want to ask you, how many more innocent lives need to be lost before leaders of this country consider school shootings and gun control a serious issue?
Way too many. It's sad to say, but way too many. Like, when I heard this story, I just, like, broke down on the inside, because it's like time and time again, we see this. We see young people who lives are cut so short, people who could be, the next artists, the next scientists, athletes, activists, people who can make change in this country, gone because politicians don't want to do the work that they need to do. They're so focused on the money that they get from like the NRA and stuff like that, that they're not going to, do anything for gun control, because that's playing with their pockets. And it's sickening because we see this so many times. Like, I think I was reading that Education Week reported that in 2021, there's been like 38 school shootings, a year where, a lot of schools were either remote or hybrid or like some type of in person. 38 school shootings. And in 2021, like the first 200 days, there was over 131 mass shootings across this country. It is ridiculous the ways that people can just like have these weapons and do all of these things to hurt others. And politicians will just be like, our thoughts and prayers are with the community.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, thoughts and prayers ain't going to change shit. Thoughts and prayers ain't going to bring back the lives who were lost. Thoughts and prayers is not going to do anything to prevent things like this in the future. Change will, reform will, gun control will, and they're not doing it. And it's absolutely sickening to me.
I fully agree. I think this, it's I really hate having to report on this kind of story because it's so common, and that's sad, at how common and how often this happens. And it really just breaks your heart, because you realize that as much as we talk about this kind of stuff, as long as those pockets is going, as long as that green is being made and that green is being exchanged, those politicians won't make that change. The crazy part is I don't even know what to do anymore. Like, I don't know what we have. This has been a fight going on for, I don't know, decades, more than that. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? As long as handguns have been around, and it's just the arguments going around a Second Amendment, our right to bear arms, or, it's not the guns. Here we go. My favorite. What's the argument? Guns don't kill people. People kill people. Mental illness. And it's just like, and it's baffling to me how this, even after all this time, we're still having the same argument. we're still having the same discussion, and we're not realizing that. And you know, I think we talked about this a little bit before in our previous episodes, but you know, it's really crazy how they'll love these people who argue about about not having gun control. Will scream mental health, but there are no bills put on the docket to make mental health affordable for all. There's no bills on the docket that make health insurance required to pay for therapy. There's nothing on the dockets being made of that. No kind of reform to ensure that it's affordable, because unfortunately, mental illness and getting actual therapy is expensive as shit.
Right.
And those of us who do want therapy, those of us who do or wish we could afford that, are not able to, because it's not easy accessible. Some of these therapists, even the cheapest sessions I've seen are sometimes $250 to $150 a session. And it's like, who got that kind of money every week? Because I mean, honestly and truly, to get the real help you need, you would need at least once a week to be able to get through that stuff. And it just baffles me. And what I think another level to it is, I don't know if this is true or not, correct me if I'm wrong, Daquon, but I think they said he actually was on social media too beforehand, saying that he was going to do this, and nobody took it seriously. I don't give a fuck if you joking, if you playing, if it's whatever. If you see some shit like that, it's time to report. Period. And I think we learned about this. I learned about this in psychology class. That bystander effect idea, where it's like somebody will do it, somebody will report them, and then eventually, if somebody, nobody does it, because they all think that somebody else is going to do something about it. And it's like, I think that we're in a state where I think that we don't take those kinds of threats seriously. If somebody is threatening bodily harm to someone, I've learned this in therapy. If you say that you're going to go and hurt someone, the therapist is legally obligated, regardless of how you meant to say it or whatever you meant to, or whatever you might have just been talking and claying or kikiing. If you say that you're going to commit a grievous action against someone, they will report you. Yeah. They will put you on a psych hold. They will call the police. If you say I'm going to kill someone, they're not going to be like, oh, they're just talking through some issues. No, they're going to report you. And so I don't understand why we're not enforcing that in schools to say, if you see something, say something. If you see something, report something. Even if you don't think even if it doesn't turn out to be anything super serious, you still report it. And if you don't want to, even make it one of those anonymous lines, you know what I'm saying? And that can be problematic in its own way, because, you know, white people might take that and do that, you know, whatever. But I think that there needs to be something to be able to see that. And on top of that too, we're still not really cracking down on bullying. Now, again, I want to make this very clear. In no way in shape, form, or fashion am I excusing this kid's actions. Not one way at all. Right. But the reality is, mental health is an issue, and bullying is a serious issue in schools that is not taken seriously enough. We do the projects, we have the meetings, but people are not actively doing the work it takes to get rid of that shit. Like when you see somebody in the hallway getting bullied, there isn't the teachers don't really do much about it. They kind of ignore it. They're overworked, they're underpaid, so they're not really worried, that they're not taking the time to look at that kind of stuff. So it's just like there's so many differing factors in here, but the main root of it is the gun control. It's how accessible guns are to people, the access to the weapons. And it's not just handguns. People have, like you said, semi-automatic weapons. People can get machine guns, all kinds of stuff, like almost military grade weaponry. Right. And they call it collecting. We're collecting. For the fuck what?
For what?
And I think, like, I just even simply saying, like, having like a limit of how many weapons you can have, or if you're going to be a military collector or whatever, you can't buy ammunition too, as well as, I don't know, like you know what I mean? Like something. I'm not a policy maker. I don't understand how the system works, but I do know that even though I don't understand it completely, I know and recognize it's a problem. Right. And so I just feel like even when it comes to that mental illness argument, that I think it's just kind of void and done. If you notice, every time this happens, that's the first thing we hear. That's the first thing we hear. And every time, nothing fucking changes. The mental illness argument is done to death And nothing is done about making therapy accessible, making therapy affordable, making therapy something that is covered under all insurances, regardless of what you got.
Right, because let's be real. Like, this is the Melanin Margin, so conversations about race are never off the table. It's because when you think about school shootings, the majority of the shooters are white. And so they're like, oh, well, like, it's this white person. We have to, like, save them,
Yeah.
put them in a
Oh,
good light. So talk about bullying first and talk about all of these different things. Because if it was a black person, if it was a Middle Eastern person, any person of color, they would be demonizing that person and that whole community. They would be bringing up, oh, this person was a troublemaker in third grade and in kindergarten, he bit
that's not
another
funny.
student or whatever. And it's like crazy because, like, let's
Daquon,
be
that's a
real.
troublemaker in third grade, not in third grade. But I see what
No,
you're saying.
because
I get what
it's
you're saying.
true.
Yeah.
Like, even as the reporting goes on this case, a lot of the times you will see this person, the shooter, the gunman, they would show like elementary school photos of this person. This person is in high school. There are updated photos. This person is being tried as an adult. Yet still, we're still babying this person by creating this image. And so it's one of these frustrating things. Like, let's be real. Like, if it was any other race doing school shootings, SWAT teams would be sent in. It would be all different types of things to put this under control. But it's white people coming from conservative backgrounds. Like, the mother has all of these different conservative Trump supporting posts. So, like, when you come from a place that supports so much hate, it's not surprising that you would have hate in your heart and be able to do something like this.
Daquon, I am so glad you brought that up because I mean the racial undertone of this whole thing, and just when you brought it up, that really just brought things into perspective too. Because reality is, I never even noticed the fact that when it's school shootings and it's white people involved, mental health is the first thing they talk about. But let it be a black person, it's monsters, demonizing. The first thing that I came up with just now, where you were talking, was the killing of Ma'Khia Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we knew the backstory behind it, actually being like something that she was being harassed by grown people and stuff like that, or whatever the case may be, the only thing we hear in the story is she lunged at the girl with a knife. So she had to be shot and killed. Fuck her mental health, right?
Right.
Fuck her stress and the stuff that she had going on, right? Because as far as the media is concerned, that was a rightful death. And even though the media is not saying that this particular person was faultless, the conversation is still surrounding the fact of bullying. He was bullied. He was so hurting so bad. Mental illness. He might have killed people, but mental illness.
He's a bullied teen.
He was such a good boy before this, but these bullies, they made him a murderer. Bitch. What? And it's like you said, where's that same energy? Where is that same energy when it's a black? And like you said, if it was a person of color involved in this shooting or involved in this massacre, the conversation would have been something completely different. Actually, it would have been called a massacre.
Right.
And not a killing or shooting. It would have been called what it was. But because they're trying to use certain different words, like it was a shooting, making it sound as if it was accidental. Like even just the connotations of certain words, a school shooting, it sounds like, something, it automatically brings up imagery of bullying and mental illness because that's the conversation that surrounds school shootings, instead of calling it what it was, a massacre. Someone going out and murdering people.
And having a plan to do that.
Premeditated. So fuck mental illness at that point. And no one's saying that he might not have been struggling with that, but the reality is, and we need to get, and also, and this might not be, we might have enough time to get into this topic, but might be enough to save for another episode. But let's stop equating mental illness with violent tendencies.
Say that again.
Let's stop this narrative that mental illness equals violence, because that is not the case. The reality is mental illness can be a contributing factor, But there are several people struggling with mental illness who are not murdering people. There are plenty of people who've been bullied who are not murdering people. So let's stop with this narrative of, we need to get the mental health together. We need to get the bullying under control. It's like, yes, that is all good and fine too, but also recognize that the issue is also that person deciding to murder people and gun control. Let's get that together and stop that. So hopefully one of these days, the conversation will shift. Hopefully one of these days, the conversation will actually turn to the real issue at the root of all of these school shootings, out of all of these school massacres. If we could get to that root of gun control and get that under control, we would be good to go. But people don't want to play that kind of game. They want to keep screaming mental illness.
Right. It's so sad that children have to be afraid to go to school. But let's move on to our final topic of today. Let's talk about the controversy surrounding Doja Cat and her AMA wins. The American Music Awards recently awarded Doja Cat with Favorite Female Soul/R&B Artist and Favorite Soul/R&B Album for Planet Her, beating out other nominated artists such as her, SZA, Jasmine Sullivan, and Jhené Aiko. However, many Twitter users questioned Doja's inclusion as a nominee for this genre. Content creator and influencer Denzel Dion tweeted, "I don't know why they keep her in this category knowing damn well she is pop." Another Twitter user, Steph, called out the AMAs for having a larger race issue, tweeting, "Just because someone's Black doesn't mean their music is automatically R&B/soul." And like, we're tired of having to have this conversation, like more microaggressions and stereotypes. But I want to pass this conversation to you. Do you think that the music industry has a problem with just labeling all music made by Black artists as R&B and soul?
Absolutely. It's honestly so fucking stupid. Like, it's crazy that like these awards, and I mean, honestly, this doesn't really surprise me because the truth is we know that, you know, the Oscars, Grammys, AMAs, all these places are oftentimes run by white people. They're the ones making those decisions, and they see Black music as being only able to fit into one of two categories, R&B or rap. That's about it. And they see Black people as only being able to contribute to those particular categories. What I think is incredibly racist too is the fact that white people are able to go across all categories without question. And we are not afforded that same regard. Like, the first thing I think about is Lil Nas X, when his song Old Town Road came out, and they I think it was the Country Music Awards, people didn't want to recognize that as a country song because the rap undertones in it. And I'm kind of like, since when was music just one thing?
Right.
Since when was it just, because it was a Black man? And it was, but I will say one thing, Billy Ray Cyrus, I got to give him props to it, because I mean, he came through, because he was like, this is obviously a country song, y'all dumbass racist people. So he was like, okay, say it's not country now that I'm with it. And so he was actually exercising his privilege and tried to share that privilege with a Black person to help showcase the fact that, oh yes, honey, this is exactly what it is. It is country music. But the fact that he even had to do that in the first place is a problem.
Right.
The fact that it took a white person having to say, hey, this is country, and hey, I'm a country music singer saying this is country music, and I'm going to get on the song to make y'all know it's country, to help it become country. It's like, or help it be recognized as country. That's a problem. That's a problem. Beyonce's Daddy Lessons, wasn't that also one that was critiqued too by the country board to say, oh, that's not, we don't know if we want to recognize that. Am I right or wrong about that?
I feel like you're right. I'm not sure 100%, but like, it sounds right.
It's yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I think even if it wasn't necessarily directly challenged by them, it was challenged by the people voting and the people in the community, because they were like, "Oh no, that's not country music," and it's only because Beyonce's Black. It's only because of that. That's the only reason why. And so I think that it's absolutely a big problem to categorize all Black music as R&B and soul. It is problematic on so many different levels because they want to pigeonhole us and put us in a box of what we can and can't create. They want to put us in a box of saying that this is all that we're able to give you. This is all that, here we go, this is all we think that you're worthy of receiving. And having us be able to break down those barriers and having to get through, it's kind of like we can make our own award shows, and we have our own award shows and good stuff like that. But like the fact that we are still in the major awards shows and ceremonies, like the Oscars so white and the Grammys so white and all that good stuff, it's like it's just, well, all that bad stuff, it's just like over and over and over again, we see there's a problem. And the reason why is, and then we know the reason. The reason is because the people in charge of voting on it, the committee, the people in the background, the people making the big decisions are usually all white men and women. And so and this goes back to our conversation about Sneakerella, it's like if you don't have people of color in those spaces to help make accurate depictions of that story or accurate depictions of that song or saying like what it is, it's kind of like one conversation with another Black person would let you know that song that Doja Cat made was she's a pop artist. Or they are one conversation with a Black person that said Lil Nas X's song, even us in the Black community, like that's country. That's country. That's fully country music. It don't get no more country than that. But again, it's because they do not allow us in those spaces to make the decisions. It's one thing for it to be to have people hosting it that are Black or are in the rooms that are Black. But the reality is the people making the decisions on who wins the award, who gets nominated, and what category they get nominated in are usually all white men and women, and they make those decisions.
Yeah, and it's crazy because like if I just think about Doja Cat as an artist in general, the first genres I'm going to think about is pop and rap.
Yes.
Because like that's who Doja Cat is. Like I wouldn't consider her a soul artist or R&B artist like Jasmine Sullivan is. Like completely different sounds. And so like it really makes me believe that whoever was like creating the nominees list was just like, Black woman, we're going to put her here. Because like how do you listen to something like Planet Her and like not recognize the different like sure she's like one of those overarching kind of musicians where she kind of breaks the boundaries of genres, but like she's not R&B and soul. Like it's one of those things that it's crazy because when you think about how Black people literally created like all of the music genres that we are deemed popular now in America, like started with Black music, and yet still white people love to pigeonhole Black people into one of two categories. And it's one of those things where if you listen to the music, if you were actually in tune with who the artist was and what they do, like you wouldn't be making these silly little stupid mistakes. So it's incredibly frustrating because you also see so many Black artists whose work kind of goes unrecognized because of what's happening with how they deal with categories in music. So like someone like Jasmine, listen, it may sound like I'm a Jasmine Sullivan stan. I will stand for Jasmine Sullivan because her music is amazing. But like
she is the moment. I mean,
won.
come on now.
Come on now. Like, I don't know why you're gagging. She brings it to you every time. But I really think that like there is this like level of just like not caring about Black people in these award shows. And it's also kind of confusing because like why didn't they put her in rap? Like if we're thinking about the one of two categories, I think that a lot of times they see rap as being like this very aggressive, very just like overtly sexual thing. And like sure, Doja Cat has those types of songs, but I think that they see Doja Cat as being too tame for rap. And I think that's also very problematic in perpetuating this notion that rap and, you know, Black music always has to be overly aggressive and overly sexualized and all of this, because you're then just like making those same assumptions about the people who create that music.
Exactly. I think that and I think there's even another nuance there of the fact that like, you know, people think that artists have to stay in one area. So like, let's say that Doja Cat did make a R&B and soul, that's where she started. But like, you know, she decided that's not the sound that she wanted. So she decided to transition to more of a pop, you know, rap sound. And it's kind of like, not recognizing the transition of an artist's journey, I think that's also problematic in its own right too, because you're pigeonholing them or typecasting them as a certain type of performer when artists shift and change over time and they grow and they explore different avenues of their sound until they find their voice. And so I think that it's kind of it's frustrating because we're not recognizing the fact that, you know, there is crossover.
Right.
You know, there is that idea of like, okay, this sounds this like songs can be both rap and country or pop and R&B or rap and pop or whatever the case may be. And I think that there's not enough room for that crossover, and then adding the fact that they already don't want to have artists, like adding the fact that even just regular artists, like taking our race out of the equation, even just artists in general, like the fact that once you get known for something, that's all that people want to see from you. And you're essentially not allowed to do anything differently. And so adding race into that also, not only is it like, it's kind of like a double whammy, a double whammy on that one. Because not only do they not expect artists to be able to do anything different, but now they only expect Black artists to make R&B and soul music. So it's two levels to it on that case.
Yeah. And it's incredibly frustrating because, like, good music is genre breaking. Like, good music has aspects of so many different genres. And I think that when you have an artist like Doja Cat, like, you can tell the different influences she's had. She's not just like, she has some type of R&B and soul influence, but if you listen to a song like Get Into It, yeah, like you can see like Nicki Minaj's influence when she literally shouts her out. And so it's frustrating because all of those nuances, like we're talking before, when we think about Blackness and we think about Black art and Black culture, there is so many nuances to it. And so when you lose those nuances, when you lose those different connections and how different styles and creativity overlap and combine to be something that like doesn't fit into one mold, you're essentially flattening it and just being like, oh, it can only be one. Like, no, it can't. It can be way more.
And I just want to know why there isn't a crossover category. You know what I mean? Like in these music awards, like Grammys and AMAs, country music, or whatever case may be, why isn't there a crossover category? Like a song that, like, even though it may not sound, you know, a certain, it's not obviously country or obviously rap or obviously pop or R&B or whatever it is. Why isn't there a genre called crossover sound? Do you know what I mean?
Like, Black people started that. Like, if we're being honest, Black people started that, so they're not going to want to recognize it. Because, like, seriously though, like when you think about Black music, especially when you think about like pop artists, you know, collaborating with rap artists and how that kind of blends itself into their music, or pop artists collaborating with R&B artists, and these R&B artists collaborating with rappers. And so like having those multi-dimensional types of genres, they're not going to recognize it.
And like, now that you bring it up too, it's so like Childish Gambino is one of the first people that comes to my mind when it comes to that, because like he took a song from Adele. It was like he sampled a song from her, and it was like the words that I'm not gonna sing it too much because I don't want to get copyrighted, but you know what I'm like. But like, I ain't trying to get a copyright strike on the channel, but you know that song. He used that song and he added like a rap element to it, and he had the song and he had that verse kind of repeat, and we see that a lot in like in Black culture. In Black music, we'll see a lot of times, especially in rap too, we'll see a lot of taking old music and bringing it back in style. Like, sampling.
Sampling.
Yes, but in a way that's more obvious, I would say, than other sampling that I've noticed, because there are people who sample other music from other races, but like I think that with Black people we do it, and I think that there's a different way that we do it that just makes people want to listen to the old song too. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a resurgence, because I've seen sampling in other races, but it's just something, I don't know, just different when it hit with us. Because like I remember seeing, I forgot what that song, I think it was, what was it? I think it was Kanye West who did the girl, you know I love you. That one right there. And he did the rap song like that. And we went back and people went back to listen to Lenny Williams' original song and stuff like that. Like it's just the way that we create this crossover, the way that we create that nuance and that like that genre bending music, and which is basically what music is, and that kind of breaking down those barriers. It's so amazing. It's so phenomenal. And I just wish that there was something that was able to recognize the fact that sometimes music doesn't fit in a box. It's not going to fit as pop, and stop trying to make it fit as she's a pop artist, she's a R&B artist, she's a this artist, a country, a blah, blah, whatever. It's like, let people experiment. Let people go out and let people just recognize talent. Recognize talent and effort in that work, in that genre bending and that crossover work, and let that be, its own category. Let that be its own kind of thing. But like you said before, we created it, so they ain't about to give us no acknowledgement about that.
Right.
So, and it's just like I said before, I really hope that we can see a change in that, because it would be really nice to see people recognize crossover and genre bending music as a valid form, and give people their flowers.
Or this may be a crazy idea. Why do we have so many categories in the first place? Why do we have all these categories? Why not get rid of them?
Now, the table is always hot with current events and social issues, but sometimes the heat can get a little intense. So let's turn the temp down, take a breather, and get into this week's topic cool down. Now, Daquon, I wanted to ask you, do you think that you can truly be in love with multiple people at the same time?
I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say no because I'm thinking about myself and how I am in this moment. And I don't think that I, as a person, can. Not saying that, like, that's me forever. Not saying that, like, I could never. But I think me and how I am in this moment, that's not really my vibe. But I do think that in general, like, it's crazy to think that there's 7 billion people on this planet and you can only love one of them at a time. Like, how does that make sense? Like, where's the math? Because the math ain't mathing for me. But I do think that, love is one of those things that it's this strong entity, it's this strong force, and like, you can't control that. So like, it's crazy to think that you can't love multiple people at the same time, because then you're like, oh, well, like, I'm in love with this person, so love, you gotta stop. Can't get no more.
I think that it's always interesting when I hear people have these conversations and they're like, oh, how could you possibly love more than one person? It's impossible. It doesn't work. And then I'm like, but don't you love your mom and your dad and your sister and your brothers and your friends? And you all you love them in different ways, don't you? You love your mom differently than you love your dad, but it doesn't mean that you love one or the other more or less than the other. And it's like, we already do that. Like, we already love multiple people at the same time. And so I think
different aspects.
Exactly. So I think that it's really crazy that we can apply that knowledge to falling in love. Because when you fall in love with someone, you fall in love with aspects of who they are, or you fall in love with them as a person. You say, I love these elements about you, and these things are what brought me into you and what made me love you. And I think that it's also incumbent to understand that, like, in that same vein, you can love someone else too in the same intensity as you love the other person, but for entirely different reasons. And I think that that's something people don't really recognize or understand. Like, all this, what is it called? Those love triangles you see in TV shows and movies and stuff like that. Like, why do they have to pick? Like,
right.
Like, the entirety of the Twilight franchise could have been solved with a throuple. Like,
if they were just polyamorous, it would have been fine.
Like, polyamor, I think that it's so crazy that we are oftentimes, people like, oh, we're, naturally attuned to things. And like I said, I do think that everybody is different. I do think that in specific spaces, I do believe that you have to understand what it is that you are capable of and what it is that you will not be able to handle. And I think that there's some people who are able to have a more open view of love, and there's some people who have a little bit more of a monogamous view of love. And I do think that there is something to be said, because for me, personally, I do believe that I am capable of loving more than one person at the same time, as far as falling in love with a person and having multiple partners. But I think I would cap out at 2. I think that I would, like, 2 people would be is enough. That would be enough for me. But I wouldn't have a problem with just dating one person. Like for me, if a throuple happened with me, it would have to be something that just kind of happened or occurred versus something that we're like, oh, I'm not actively seeking out to be in a trimonogamous or throuple relationship. That's not my goal. But I wouldn't be opposed to being in a trimonogamous relationship. But like I said before, I think there's a level of conversation that we don't have with ourselves because there's so many people who are not capable of monogamy and they are in monogamous relationships.
Mm.
Right. And it's because our society has taught us that we should aspire for the traditional monogamous 2-person relationship. And I think that so many people are so bogged down by religious shit or all our Christianity or whatever, and being that Christianity is the biggest religion in the world, it has been so influential in our society, and the fact that like people don't even think that that's a possibility. And like long ago, back in the day, like that shit wasn't something new. Like this is not nothing new. Like that's why I hate people say, "Oh, this is just the millennials, oh no." And it's like, bitch, it's been around for like decades, century. Like you remember the conversation back in the early '90s and 2000s about swingers, or way back in the Grecian times, people were having full-on orgies and stuff, and all kind of like it's not this. Having multiple partners is not a new thing. It's not a new concept. There are so many, even religious teachings or some religions that have like multiple wives and so on and so forth or whatever. So like, I just think it's really crazy that it's not normalized in our society yet. Like it's still something that's completely, no, it's not that crazy because again, even homosexuality has existed since the beginning of time and people are like, oh no, honey, that's some bullshit. That's some millennial shit. You know what I mean? What do you think?
I agree with you. I agree 100% because it's one of those things that's like, you always think, oh, these polyamory relationships, it's like these crazy taboo things, or you think about like Sister Wives or like shows that like try to depict people who have like multiple partners as being weird and different and just like non-moral. And I think that the problem is that you see this as being something immoral, and like at the end of the day, like a lot of polyamorous relationships work because there is so much consent, because there is so much communication. And so that's why like for somebody like me, I'm like, I probably can't handle that right now because like I barely communicate with myself, if I'm being honest. Like I stay booked and busy, as you know. Like I have a lot to do. So having that relationship with one person is enough, let alone, having that ability and that time to really devote to like communicating and sharing love with multiple people at the same time. Not in my wheelhouse at the moment. But like you, I can see myself, like I wouldn't, be like, oh, never in a million years. Like if it happens, like it happens, and I'm not gonna like fight against it,
I do think that there is something to be said too, because I think the first thing people go to is sex. That the reason why people want to have trinogamous relationships is sex. And it's like, that's not like, they're just like, oh, you just want a 3-way. It's like, no, I think that real people, I think that it goes back to that conversation we had before about like even just homosexuality and the media being considered, oh, it's always about sex. It's always about that. And it's kind of like, no, this is not about immorality or sex. It's sex is a part of it, yeah, but it's not the main part of why people get in these relationships. They get in these relationships because people fall in love, and it just happens. You can't really control who you fall in love with. You can't really control how many either. And I think there's something to be said too. Also, shit, if you want to be real T girl, like, bitch, you know what, bitch, you have 3 people in the house. That's the bill split three down the middle.
Girl, we're not talking about bills.
Mortgage, if it's split between 3 people, if your mortgage is $500 and you split it between 3 people, that ain't shit.
Right. One person takes the internet bill, one person takes the water bill, one person takes the power bill.
Baby, oh, hold on, wait a minute. Who cooking tonight? It's between the 3 of us. I ain't gotta cook 2. I only gotta cook what? About 2 nights a week. Like, you know what I'm saying? But that's me being joking a little bit. But the truth is, I just really do think that people are just not really aware. And I think that there's so much closed-mindedness in our society. And I'm just kind of like, bitch, grow up. Like, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. But don't dog walk or get mad at other people because they're like, this is my thing. If you don't, and they're like, oh, and then, here we go, the kids, bitch, you got 3 daddies. You got a mom and 2 dads, or whatever kind of combination you got. If one of them busy, go to another one and spend time with them. This person busy, go to this person. I mean,
people just stay in other people's business, and I'm just like, mind the business that pays you.
Oh my God, the world would be such a better place if people would just mind their motherfucking business. Like, let it go.
Free.
If it's not hurting someone, or if it's not affecting you, why does it matter to you at all? And that's on Period Public Example. So many children grow up never knowing the full scope of what their culture has contributed to society and history. So it's time for a change. Let's take a pause, rewind, and remind the world just how we did that. Now, in the article, 26 Black Americans You Don't Know But Should, we learn about Mary Ann Anderson. Now, though she's considered one of the greatest contralto singers in the world, Anderson was often denied the opportunity to show off her vocal range because of her race. However, things started to change in 1957 when she went on a 12-nation tour sponsored by the Department of State and the American National Theater and Academy. She documented the experience in her autobiography, My Lord, What a Morning. Now, in 1963, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Her last major accomplishment before her death was receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys in 1991.
Again, black
women
and Black musicians not getting their flowers because of racism.
Period.
So for mine, I wanted to pay homage to World's AIDS Day, which was December 1st. So in the article on blackpast.org, we learned about Essex Hemphill, who was a unapologetically open gay man, poet, and performer. Hemphill studied English at the University of Maryland, College Park. During a poetry reading at Howard University in 1980, he came out publicly as gay. Hemphill's first books, Earth Life in 1985 and Conditions in 1986, both addressed the impact of AIDS on both the Black community and the larger gay community. His critically acclaimed anthology, In the Life, one of the first collections of writing by a gay Black man, opened to the general public the topic of homosexuality in the African American community. Hemphill's Brother to Brother in 1988, which was a collection of essays written by Black gay men, was also considered groundbreaking at the time. By mid-1994, however, Hemphill's health was rapidly declining and he died of complications from AIDS on November 4th, 1995, at the age of 38.
But still, Black queer talent.
Right.
Fucking up the game, bitch. Fucking it up. Now, as always, thank you all so much for watching. And please keep the conversation going down in the comment box below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you are listening to us on our podcast, please rate and review on whatever platform you're using. If you want to follow us on social media, our handles are at Andre Talks a Lot and at Daquon950. You can also follow our podcast on Instagram at The Melanin Margin for updates of new content. Now, we will see you all next week on the Melanin Margin, where our goal is always to bring the marginalized to the spotlight in any way we can, okay?
Goodbye now.